Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's class. So I'm running into this class from last week. From our last session, we talked about fundamentals of React, where we looked at some concepts, right, with regards to routing. We're able to handle routes. We handled nested routes, and we also did a little bit of context where we defined some protection for our protected routes, right? So today we will be moving a little bit further to talk about life cycle and a little bit of state management in forms, right? So basically not just in forms, but life cycle as a whole, right? Then we will handle forms too. So let me hear from one or two people. What do we understand so far? Because I know I've spoken about life cycle a couple of times when I've had the need to bring up React hooks, right? So what do you understand by life cycle of of a React application? What do we understand by that? You just raise your hand. I want you guys to speak. Okay. So nobody yet. All right. I have one hand. One more. Then we kick off. All right. While we wait for the next person to step up, Udo, go ahead and unmute yourself and let's hear from you.
Okay, going by what you mentioned in the last class, the life cycle is actually when a component mounts and when it unmounts too. So more or less like when it's rendered, and I think.
Okay. All right. Okay. Who else? Who else is going? Thank you. Thank you so much, Udo. Who else is going? Please remember, in this class, nobody's wrong. Just go ahead and let's hear your thoughts, your POV on this. I would call somebody if nobody raises their hands. So David Amosu, let's hear from you. What comes to mind when you hear life cycle in React?
Life cycle in React means a component that refers to the phases it goes through from creation and deletion.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So yeah, so basically what they've mentioned, fundamental. So Michelle says fundamental concepts for building dynamic and interactive user interface. Okay. All right. So basically, thank you, Michelle, for that. So basically, life cycle, let's say a life cycle of a particular component, right, is just the cycle it takes through the process of mounting, updating, and then getting destroyed, right? So there are like different stages a particular component goes through when trying to render to the DOM, right? So there is the stage where where it is mounted, that is like when it is born, right? And then there is a stage where there are updates made to it. That's so let me use the analogy of a human being, right? So the life cycle of a human being is birth, correct? Birth, then update. That update is when you are growing, attaining puberty, attaining other features that becoming mature, and then there is the unmounting state where you now die, right? All of us are not going to die. So now, React components have the same life cycle, right? So there is a mounting state where the component is born. That's when the component is rendered to the DOM. And then there is an update state. That is when you are taking actions on that particular component that has been rendered to the DOM. And then there is an unmounting state when that component is no longer needed on the DOM. So it is now removed completely. That's when call it is being destroyed, right? That's the unmounting state. So that's like basically what it means when we say life cycle in React. Okay. Are we together? Do we understand that? Or should I take that again? All right, so we understand. Okay. Good. So remember that we already handled the use state, right? So, okay, someone wants us to take it again. Yes, you're right. Okay. Yeah, we can do that quickly. So pay attention, please, okay? Just unmute yourself first and then let me know exactly where you're lost, okay? Yes, you're right.
Actually, I was not hearing you before, so that's why when I came in, I noticed that I could not hear you very well.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. I want you to explain it.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. So I'll just take it over again from top.
Oh,
Okay, so basically we are talking about React lifecycle, right? Component lifecycle in React. So basically, when we say component lifecycle, we are just referring to the different stages that a component passes through, right? So let's say let's liken it to a living thing, right? So every living thing has different stages. It's born, that is created, then it undergoes stages of growth, which is updates, and then also undergoes the stage of death, which is on mounting, right? So for components, component lifecycle has number one, mounting state. Number two, it has the stage where it gets updated, and then also has a stage where it is unmounted. So let's assume that we want to display a particular component to the DOM, right? At the stage, as the stage where that component is being displayed to the DOM, that is the stage of mounting, right? That's the lifecycle state of mounting. At the stage when the component is being updated, probably you are changing, maybe you have an incremental value that you are trying to update, right? Now you're updating that value within that component. So that means that component is still mounted, right? At that stage, you are updating the component. That's the update stage of the life cycle. Now, when you remove that component completely from the DOM, say maybe it was a page and you want to move to the next page, that page that you are moving out of will get unmounted, which means to get destroyed on the DOM. So with that, you now get to mount a different component, right? That stage where that first component is removed is now the unmounting stage, which is like destroying that component, right? So that sums up the life cycle of the component. Do you understand? Yes, you are. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Cool. So we already handled. Let's go into our code and see what we can do. All right. So let's come to dashboard. So, okay, let's walk inside the home page, right? So let's create the H1 page. Okay. So for this, let's just write a simple use states counter function, right? So let's say const count set count. Okay. So what we have here, we have a simple use state declaration. So we want to have a count. So the initial state of this count is 0. And then this function, we will use it to update our count, correct? Now, so let's say we display the present value of our account over here, right? So let's say, let me change this. Let's say you clicked count times, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and have a button to handle that event, okay? So I believe this is not something that should confuse anybody. We already handled this before, use state. So what's happening here is we are displaying our account here, which is presently it should display the initial count of 0. And then we want to use this set count to increment by adding 1 every time this on-click event is triggered, right? So if we come here, let's go back to home. So we have this click me, right? And then we can now click and it updates our value, correct? So what we have done now is just simple use state. So now, at the stage when we clicked on home, right? We mounted this home page, correct? This home page component in our life cycle. Now, at the stage where we started updating clicking, this is us updating this home page component. Okay. Now, if we leave the home page component, excuse me, and go to about us, we have destroyed that home page component on the DOM. It is not destroyed completely, it is destroyed on the DOM. It is no more available on the DOM, right? But if we come back to it, we can remount that very component. So I just wanted you to get a little bit more clarity on what we mean by the life cycle, right? Now, there are methods for handling life cycle. Like we won't be looking at the class function method for now. We will focus more on the functional component methods. Okay, so let's dive into it. So basically, we'll be working with use effect, but I will still tell you a little bit about what the class component versions of lifecycle handling looks like, right? So in the class components methods, we have components will mount, right? Component did mount, component will update, and then we have component will unmount, okay? And I think that's not exhaustive. There are still others that we can look at. That's something that I would like you to go ahead and research, right? Then we can brainstorm about it inside Discord. All right, thank you. So for React, for functional components, we are going to be looking at use effects. So first of all, let's import use effects. So basically what we use effect to do is control lifecycle. Unlike for the class components, class-based components, you have to define each stage separately, right? But for use effect, you can use use effect to control what you want to do at a particular time or at a particular point of the life cycle of your application. Okay, so let's say maybe when your page loads, on first load, you want to call an API. Use effect is what you will use to do that. So in that case, now you can have like a use effect function that just makes that API call every time your component mounts. Now you might want a situation where you want to add a dependency to say, okay, I want this API call to be made whenever a particular content has an update. Okay. Now that content will now serve as your dependency. Okay. So let's just go ahead and write some some code. So basically, use effect is like the brain behind side effects in your application, okay? So let's say we want to write a simple, please acknowledge you understand where we are at the moment, please, before I go on. Should I explain further about use effect? Or do we have a clear understanding? I need response, please. Okay. So I think someone wants us to explain further. So we understand that use effect is a React hook, right? Provided by React, basically. So like I said, you can use it to decide what you want to do with a particular piece of code at a particular point in the life cycle of your application, right? So if use state is like your component's memory to store data, use effect is like your component's behavior. It reacts to the data, okay? So let's say you want to make reactions based on the state of a particular data. Use state can manage that state for you. Then you can now make sure that when the state is updated or changed or whichever way, you can now decide to use that state as your dependency to run a particular code function within your use effect, okay? Now, what's the side effect, right? Side effects are like actions. So those actions are like outside the scope of just rendering HTML. They are often involved, they often involved interacting with the outside world, right? So basically, we're like saying for every action, we want to control what is happening for every action, right? So those side effects are the actions that you are going to be doing on your application's UI, right? So as a user, when I take an action on the UI, those actions, I want to control what happens for every action. And then for me to control that, every action is changing a particular state of a particular thing. So I want to utilize that state change to run particular kind of effects, right? During my application's lifecycle. So I can use it to maybe fetch new data, set timer, right? Log something to the console, directly changing the DOM, whichever thing I want to do in that kind of scenario, right? So this is a simple use effect syntax, right? And within here we have the depend, then C. Okay, good. So basically what we have here now is a simple use effect function, right? Basic syntax of a simple use effect function. Now you can decide to write all your code logic that you want to happen within this use effect inside this space, right? So let's just use the text as provided already, okay? So let's go ahead and put something here. So let's say we want to log something to the console here, right? So we want to log this to the console at first mount. So I'll remove this. Okay. All right. So save. So you can see it's logged here. You click 0 times. So if I go out of here, let's clear this and then So if I mount the home page, immediately you can see that that console.log content is rendered here, right? Now let's assume that I want to add this as my dependency. So whenever this count changes, I want to run this side effect again, right? So if I come here, okay, so let's go ahead and try that again. So at this stage, we have you clicked 0 times. So ideally, when we click again, it should show you clicked 1 time. And when we click again, we should show it clicked 2 times. So what's happening here is that for every time this count updates, which is the present dependency array for this use effect, it will always run this. But if it doesn't change, if this count does not change, this side effect is not going to run. Okay? Are we together? Do we understand so far? All right. So basically, this is our dependency. What we call this particular array is dependency array. So you can actually have more than one dependency here, okay? So maybe you have a very complex logic written inside your side use effect that depends on a couple of dependencies. Of course, you can add as many dependencies as you want within this dependency array, okay? So we can have count, and then we can also have other dependencies to make as criteria for rerunning this use effect. Now, what this use effect helps us to do is it reduces re-render, right? It helps you manage re-render better, okay? Are we together? Now, we can actually effect function without the dependency array. Simply, this means that this use effect does not have any dependency. So anytime you mount this code, right, it is going to just run this particular code within here. So what you can use this for is maybe make an API call on first mount, right? That way you are sure that every time you mount that particular screen, that API call will always be made, okay? Then there is when you have the dependency array, okay? Are we following, please? Yeah, so, okay, all right. I'm seeing just 2 people respond, and we have like quite a lot in the class. Are we together? Are we following? Okay. Ayomide, I hope you are following. Ayomide, are you with us? Just respond in the text box. All right. Obina. Is Obina in the class today? Okay, Obioma, thank God. Are you following? Are you good? All right, okay, excellent. All right, let's continue. So now we understand basically the difference between having dependency and not having dependency at all, right? So So basically, another difference you need to understand with dependency is that if there is no dependency array, okay, every state change is going to rerun this use effect. So if we come here and then we click this, if we click again, it will always run that use effect because there's no dependency array. So assuming the dependency array was there and it was empty, like this, without a dependency, it will run that dependency only once. Okay? It will run that use effect only on mount. So even if I change this state, as you can see, I'm changing the state and it is not responding on the console. So that use effect is not being run at the moment because we have declared a dependency array and we have not specified what our dependency is. Yes, Chidel, please go ahead, unmute yourself.
Okay, sir. This use effect, I still don't really grab. Is it that it's like a JavaScript something like? What is it like the reflect? What is the main work or the main work of the use effect in Yet application?
Yeah, so I think that's what we've been trying to explain for a while now. And I don't know if you've been following. Have you been following the class?
Yes.
Because I've been asking, are you following? Are you following? And you haven't responded. And we have gone so far, and now you don't understand what we're doing. So use effect is basically a React hook provided by React. Okay, it helps you manage particular side effects in your application's life cycle rather. Okay, do you understand? So when you say what's the basic use of use effect, the basic use of use effect is to help you manage side effects in your application, which is what we have been trying to do with this particular function that we created. So initially we talked about the use effect basic syntax, which is an arrow function that has a dependency array. Now, I also talked about the fact that this dependency array can be omitted if we want to just run the use effect for every time that the state changes, right? At the same time, we also said we can have this and it will run only once if we don't specify the particular dependency. Okay. Now, what this use effect does is what we have told it to do in this particular example is to console log you clicked number of counts times to our browser console, right? Now, what we are trying to achieve here is for every time, let's assume we don't have a dependency array. So we are saying for every time this count changes, we want to run this use effect, which means we want to see this console.log in our console. So when we come back here and we click on this, you see that the use effect runs. And every time it runs, it shows the new value of count. You see that initially the last count was 21. Every time we add, the next count will be 23. So this this use effect is actually working perfectly. Okay. Now, if we add an empty dependency array, right? And then we go back to our code and try to increment. You see that our incrementing logic is actually working, but the side effect, the use effect is not running. Because if the use effect is running, it should be displaying you clicked 3 times on the console by now, okay? But it is not running. Why is it not running? Because we did not specify any dependency to make sure this thing runs. So it's going to run only once at the stage of mount. So it is going to run only when we mount homepage. That is the only time to run, which is when it will display you clicked 0 times. Now, if we click again, it will not display, it will not run again. So this use effect runs only once because we have an empty dependency array. Now, if we specify that we want to run this use effect every time this count changes. So we are saying the dependency is the changes in the state of our count. Okay. Now, if we come to our browser, what happens in that case is every time we change the state of count, that use effect is going to run. Because now we have defined the dependency that we want to utilize to run this side effect or to run this use effect, okay? So what happens is every time this count changes, this code runs. Every time this count changes, this code will run. But if we don't add this code will run only once in the lifecycle of that component. But once we add this count, it will run every time the count here, the state of this count changes. Now, likewise, if we remove this completely, remember, it will also run every time this count changes. But this method it can cause problems, okay? Because let's assume that you have a lot of state changes that are being made, and then some kind of changes can be continuous, right? In that kind of scenario, you will have this use effect running continuously. That can be an expensive computation depending on the logic you have written within the use effect. So it's always advisable to either have an empty dependency array depending on what you want to use this side effect for. So let's assume if you want to just use this side effect to make just an API call only when the component mounts, then you can use an empty dependency array. But if you want a situation where you want to run this, maybe make the API call every time a particular state changes. So maybe you want to run it when a particular data state changes, or maybe a particular kind of side effect happens to the application, maybe by clicking user input or something of that nature, you can add that dependency. Just like in this case where we are increasing the count and we want a situation where we don't want this to run only once. We want it to run every time we click on this button. So we add this dependency, which will change. Yes, so basically inside your component, right? Inside the use effect, whatever you write inside here, there are no changes to it. Did you get? It's the same function that will always run. The only difference now is that you can now decide when to run that function, why you want to run the function, or why it should be run at a particular time, which is where you can now define your dependencies, right? So you want to now say, everything in this place, I want it to run at a particular time. I want it to run when so and so changes. I want it to run when so and so kind of input is made. Or I want it to run only once when my code mounts, okay? Or I want it to run every time or any state changes in the application, okay? Is that clear, Mohammed? Okay, Chidel, you're clear too. Okay, excellent. So, Mohammed, are we good? Oh, right. Excellent. Excel is also good. Okay. So let's go ahead and try out. All right, excellent. So let's try out something a little bit more complex, okay, so that we can see what it looks like in action. So let's say second. So we are going to set up a little timer component, okay? So let's say second, and then let's say, okay, and let's set it initial state to 0. All right. Then for our use effects, let's remove this. So let's say we want to create a timer function, right? And say interval should be equals to set interval so we utilize the arrow function and then curly braces. Okay. So within here, we want to say set seconds. And then we want to say previous second. And then we want to add 1 to previous second for every time the interval exists, right? And then we'll do 100. Okay. So let's utilize an empty dependency array, okay? And then let's return our let's clear our interval at this state. Okay. Don't get confused. I will explain everything that's been done, okay? Let's just call this previous and then previous plus 1. Okay. All right. So over here, what we're going to let's have so okay. So what we are doing now, what we want to achieve with this is we are setting a timer, right? To check ourselves to know how long we spent on this page, right? So we have an error. Okay, so yeah, we have an error here. This is not defined. No, remove this too. So yeah, what happened there is we removed that state, so it's undefined at the moment. So we should be good now. Okay. All right. So basically what we want to check is we want to say how many seconds have we spent on this page, right? On the browser. Okay. So as you can see, it is incrementing on its own. Time spent on this page, 19 seconds. Okay. Continuously. That is because we don't have any dependency. There's no dependency array here. Yeah. So it has mounted just once, and then the count is continuous, okay? Because this code is running continuously. Are we together? Do we understand so far? Okay, so I see that people have a lot of questions. So yeah. Yes, so basically, yes. So what happened here? I like the fact that somebody noticed this. So if you remember, I think some classes ago, I think our second class or so, somebody asked why it's so important, why they must import React. So basically, everything here is inside React. This use effect is inside React. Okay, everything is inside React. So we are basically accessing all these, destructuring these from React itself. So I can use React and then access use state directly from React. If I do this, I don't need to import use state anymore. So Josh, I hope that answers your question.
I didn't ask a question. Sorry, sir.
Okay, that was not a question. I think you wrote something. If you use the React.useState.
I on someone's question.
Okay, it was someone else's question. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I see. I follow now. All right, let's go on. But I believe that person understands now who was that person, please? Do you understand what was happening there? Okay, Excel. All right, excellent. Okay, so somebody's asking how is this a side effect? So basically, this is a side effect because we are taking actions. The action we are taking here is an incremental kind of action. So we are incrementing this value using this function. Okay, so for this function now, we are saying that we want to increment the seconds based on this timing. Okay, do you understand? So we're saying tick every second. Make sure that every second we're on this page, tick it that we're on this page. That's what we are doing here. And then we are updating this state, right? So anything that is happening within this is updating this second state. Okay. Then we are running it inside our use effect. Cool. Are we together? Now, for this part here, we are saying that once the component is removed from the DOM, we should clear the interval. So in that case, if I was on this page for 116 seconds, when I leave that page, that means it has destroyed, right? If I come back to that page, it should restart again from beginning. Yeah, Emmanuel, come meet yourself.
Thank you. So I quickly have a question. The idea of side effect, I asked the question the other time. So the idea of side effect, is it I think I was reading about it, was it yesterday? So, and it was actually pointing to things that are outside the purview of React. So like the APIs and the rest. So now taking a look at this, I kind of find it confusing that is this not also controlled by React? When we talk about this particular thing, dependencies and the rest, the code depends on this particular effect, this particular side effect it has its life cycle based on this on the dependency array or stuff like that. So, but in this place now, how does this? I don't really get that part because I only have the idea of APIs and the rest.
Okay, so
Thank
basically, so I think you are thinking about it too hard, right? Look at it this way. Whatever you want to do inside a use effect can serve as a side effect, okay? Because you can actually control different button text using a use effect, right? So you can say when this code mounts, when this page or this component mounts, I want to automatically set a particular name based on the page that is mounted. Cool. So in that kind of scenario now, that's still a side effect because you are moving to a particular page. When you get to that page, you are setting a particular name to state. At that point now, that state will change. That state is what you want to now use to add as the button title. I'm just using that button as the simplest way to help you understand this whole concept, right? Now, let's assume that, okay, let's create a new state. Okay. BTN auto. So BTN title. So as you can see now, the initial BTN title is click me, correct? So if I display this BTN title in our button, in our button. So I'm going to remove this from here. We will use it, okay? Hold on. So I'm going to remove that from there. And if we go to our UI now, our button should be showing click me, correct? If we come back here, that same button, if we change this to click here, right? That works too. That should work too, right? So it shows click here. Now, if we decide that for every time we come, so let's display. So we don't have a universal component to handle this. Let's work it here. So let's display this button here. Let's go to our app.jsx, right? And then let's display this button. Yeah, okay. And okay, so let me just set this up. Hold on, guys. So we are passing both the function to change this button title, and the button title itself, okay? So we also pass it. So let's also pass it to our About Us page, okay? Okay. So now if we go into our home page, we should be able to access the two of them. Button title, this is okay. So I'm going to remove the state from here. So now we have our button title here, correct? Yeah, basically that's what I want. Okay, good. So we have our button title and our set BTN title. So we'll do the same in our About Us page. Okay. Do we have the right settings? BTN title. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. Okay. All right, so no, not this. All right. So now what we are going to do is create use effects for each of these components, okay? So for this very one, let's comment this one out for now. And then let's write a new one. Use effect. Set BTN, click me. Okay. So let's say home click me so that we can identify them, okay? So what we are doing, what we are trying to say now is for this particular page, this home page, we want a situation where if we mount this home page, this button title should be home click. Okay? Are you following?
Yes, yes.
Good. Now we want to also we'll now do the same use effect inside our about page. And then we say for our about page, anytime this about page mounts, we want to do about click. We want to name it about click. Okay. Now remember the side effects that we're talking about, like the life cycle side effects of the application, or the side effects that affect the life cycle of the components, correct? Now, if we come here, okay, so React is not defined somewhere. I think here. Okay. All right. So as you can see, once we come to the home page, once we mount the home page, the button automatically sets the title to home click. So what happens here, what's happening in this our code is that we are using side effects to set this button title. Remember that this button title is the state of this button title was created inside our app.js and passed down as props, right? We pass it to our components as props. Then within our components, we are now handling that whole state management or state changes within our side effect. And this will happen only once. Okay? So when we come here and make this, when we come to our home page, this button automatically, the text in this button automatically changes, pardon me, to home click. Okay? Now, when we go to our about page, so we have an error in our about us page. React is not defined. Why do we have React is not defined here? So home page, about page. React is pretty much. Okay, so yeah, is the use effect that's not defined. Okay, so we should be good now. All right. So when we go to our home page, we can see home click. When we go to about page, we can see about click. Now we're using the same button, remember, and we are not manually changing the state, like triggering this particular function to change the name of this btn title, right? What we are doing is we are using this use effect to handle it based on the side effect of mounting. Okay, so now when the side effect happens, which is the mounting of this particular component, that is this home, it immediately runs that use effect, and that use effect changes the name of our button to home click. Likewise, when we do the same for about page. For those who do not have clarity, is it clear now? Please, I need everybody to respond because I don't want us to be going back and forth. When we explain something, I want to be sure you know it so that when we move, we know we moved. Okay? All right. Excellent. Okay. All right. Now we can continue. So based on our last, okay, Udo, that's fine. So we didn't do much here. We only declared our states here. So I think one thing I want people to understand, because I believe that I would expect that, okay, let me ask this as a question. Why do people think I came to the app.jsx to define this state? Just raise your hand and then I'll call your name, you unmute, and then can hear from you. Okay. One more person. All right, excellent. So Josh, let's hear from you first.
Okay, so the app.jxs is the parent element, right? It's the parent component. So actually what you did was prop drilling, passing props from the parent to the child.
Okay. So basically, you won't call it prop drilling because it's just one stage of passing props, right? Prop drilling, you are probably passing props deeper into more children as the hierarchy goes, right? Basically,
Yeah.
but you're pretty much on track with what you say. Yeah, Chideo, let's hear from you.
He has already said what I have in mind already.
Okay. All right. Okay, Emmanuel, okay. Let's hear from Emmanuel. Emmanuel wants to add something.
Okay. So I want to talk about derived state because you want to derive the state such that React passes data from the children to from the parent to the children, not from siblings to siblings. So and to do that, we have to derive that state from the parent component.
Okay, nice. There's something I'm looking for. If you guys are all on point, but there's a particular thought I'm looking for. It's more of a thought processing question. So Udo, let me hear from you too.
Okay, so mine is more like a question. I actually asked it on the group chat,
Okay, so
but I don't know, maybe while asking the question, the answer will come out.
okay.
You declared it as a state
Mm-hmm.
in the app.js, and then you're now calling it as props in the different components.
Yeah.
So more or less, what you're doing is moving what's it called, properties from the parents down to the children, which someone has said. But I need to understand why now you are declaring it as a state in the app.js. And my second question is, you can actually, it's possible to declare different properties in different components. I don't know if my question makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So this is the thing. So when I ask this question, I understand that everybody here knows what we are doing when we do props, right? We've even done a tax on it, and a lot of people had 100%, right? Now, what I needed you people to respond is more of a my thought processing. I was expecting a more thought processing response. Now, remember that in this scenario, I wanted to reuse, emphasis on reuse, okay? I wanted to reuse a particular state in different components. Do you get now? So for me to reuse one state, use that very state inside the home component and use it inside the about us component, it means that I have to create that state in a component that is accessible by these two as children. Do you get my point? So what happens now, what's happening is if I create this state inside homepage, inside this home, I cannot use that state inside about, because about is not a child of home, right? So in order for me to reuse that state, right? In order for me to reuse the state, I have to create it at a central location where home will be able to receive that state as props, and about us will also be able to receive that same state as props. Do we follow? Excellent. Okay, good. So remember that React is one of React's superpower is reusability, right? Modularization. So when that is why their libraries provided for global state management, right? So just like we did with context in our last class, where we created a context and then we could access the values of that context everywhere in our application, right? That's like reusability. Immediately, I think you reusability. How do I create this thing so that it can be used across board? So everybody can have a feel of it instead of just creating it in one place, then going ahead to create it in another place. Assuming I want to follow the process of creating this particular state within the home component, I'll have to create a new state in the home component and then create another state in the about us component, which will not give us a dynamic vibe that we are trying to achieve. Are we good? All right, excellent. Okay, so we can go ahead. Let's move on. So, yeah, so we're in our homepage, right? Let's continue from where we stop. So we understand what we did now, and we understand why this can be considered as a useful use effect code block. All right. Okay. All right. So let's go on. So if we test this out now, if we go to the home page, that counter should work. Okay. So hold on, guys. Let's expand on this component. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Good. So our timer works. Okay. So basically, every time we come to this page, this timer is going to work. So that is like once it mounts, it should start running. And then we also wrote a clear interval code here to make sure that when this code unmounts, so when I leave home page, it should clear the timer. So that if I come back to home page, that timer should be reset back to 0 and start again afresh. Okay, so let's move on. So let's simulate a simple API fetching of data, right? So let's assume that let's use our about page to do this. Okay, so let's assume that we have const user, and then for user, I want to set user, and then, so I don't want to confuse you guys. Let me import use state. Then that's no. Transition and okay. All right, so we have our state for user and then set user, correct? So let's should we still use this? Okay. Okay, let's just comment this out for now. So good. Now that I've commented this set btn title, to about click, right? If we mount this particular code, okay, we have internal server also. Validation. Also.
The closing curly braces for the about page.
Okay, I see it now. Okay. So it opened it and closed it. So that's why we have that issue. Okay, so if we come here, so that state is still on, the state is still on. Homepage. Okay, we commented this out, that's why it's not changing. All right, so if we go back to this application now, right? Now, what happened here is that I have removed that action that we wanted to be changing to BTN, the BTN text in About Us page. So if I click on About Us now, it will still display home click. I just wanted us to see what that looks like, right? So we'll still have the old state there because it is no more running in our side in our use effects in that About Us page. So let's say set timeout. Set timeout. Where's the zero function? Okay. And then let's say set user. And that user should be an object. So let's say this works. Okay. And then let's close that timer and then set it. Okay. Okay. So with this set now, this like a simple simulation of like calling an API, right? So we want to set this object to this user, okay? Then within our code, we want to access the user information. Okay, so within our code, we want to access the user information. So basically, user information is the user.name and then the user.age, right? Because we have user, when we set this to set user, we have name and then we have age. Okay, so now let's say initially when we display this, okay, it's going to throw an error, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so we have a fail safe already. I've already implemented a fail safe. So what happens is when there is no content to this user data, right? When there's no content to user data, we are going to be displaying loading user data, okay? But when there is content to it, we would display the user information, okay? All right, so let's go on to this page. Good. So when initial load of this page, you see that there is a loading state that is being run, right? And then as soon as the data is updated in the state, the name and age displays, right? Now what we did here is we don't want a situation where we have errors if this user does not exist at the first stage of mount, right? So we're now saying if this user is truthy, that means if there is content in this user data, then go ahead and display what we want to display to our DOM. But if the content of user, if there's no content in user, if it is null, then display loading user data as a failsafe, okay? So that's what happens here. So if I click on about again, and then we get our user information. Is that clear? Yeah, it's dynamic, yes, of course. Yeah, Chidel, go ahead and ask your questions, please. Just unmute yourself for now.
Okay, the question is what I asked in the chat, because like you use the parenthesis to declare the user. That is all. Or is it an object or what? That's what I want to ask.
To declare the user, I mean here? Here?
In the return, in the JSS, the return side.
Here? This one?
Yeah, that first one. After the H1. User, call it parenthesis, user, question mark.
Okay, so basically it can still be like this. It can still display with this. You understand? So this should still work. Okay? It's just cleaner. This is cleaner. With this, you can see obviously that I'm grouping my contents. Are we together? Do you understand? Okay, all right. So I think with this, we're pretty much done quite a lot with use effect. So I hope you all understand what we've done so far with use effect. Are we together? Let's hear in the text box, please. Okay, so let's do a little bit of forms, okay? Or would you guys like to digest this and then we take forms in our next class? Yeah, so if routing is your issue, go back to the class now. Like you can go back to YouTube and watch the class again, okay? Excel. So you can go back to YouTube, watch that class again. I think we really treated it, and you shouldn't have restrictions for how many times you want to watch the video. You can watch the video even 10 times. Make out time. Watch the video over and over again. Slow it down. Get what you need to get out of that class. You know. I believe that if you do that, you'll be able to understand it better. Yeah, so Obioma, you say it's getting clearer. All right, excellent. So like I always say, you can still watch this very class again and then try to do. So basically doing the easiest way to master is to like try it out, do it yourself, get your hands dirty, right? Oh, okay. Oh, nice to have you with us, Obioma. All right. So check out other classes, see how you can catch up with the class. And I hope you've done your tax. Make sure to do your tax on time. We have a new tax on the LMS that dropped a few minutes before this class. So please, let's try to meet up with our deadline. Okay. So I think we'll just call it a day. This class was a handful. So we'll call it a day, and in our next class, we'll start with forms, and then we'll treat other high-level things. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today's class.